I still remember that moment as if it were etched into my very soul, a searing, brutal revelation that shattered every illusion of trust and love I had clung to for years. Under the soft, warm glow of candlelight at our anniversary dinner, surrounded by the gentle hum of conversation and laughter, my wife stood and, in a voice that seemed to echo with cold finality, announced, "I've been cheating for 2 years. I'm leaving you." In those first 100 words, the shock hit me like a tidal wave, ripping through every promise we'd made, every dream we'd woven together. The world around me slowed to a painful crawl as the room, once intimate and inviting, turned into a stage for the ultimate betrayal, a betrayal that would redefine my entire existence. I had always believed our love was unbreakable. For 18 years, I had poured my heart and soul into our marriage, raising our children, building a life together, and striving tirelessly to make every anniversary a testament to our shared journey. I cherished the small, ordinary moments, the quiet breakfasts before dawn, the late-night conversations about our future, the warm embraces that reassured me everything would be all right. I thought our bond was built on trust, respect, and unwavering commitment. But that fateful evening, amid the clink of glasses and the murmur of well-wishes, everything I believed in was ruthlessly dismantled with a single, devastating declaration. The dinner had started like any other celebration of love. Our close friends and family gathered in a tastefully decorated restaurant, the ambience exuding elegance and intimacy. I wore a tailored suit, proud of the life we'd created, and my wife radiated confidence in an elegant dress. As the evening progressed, we shared stories, laughter, and heartfelt toasts to our enduring partnership. For a brief, blissful moment, I allowed myself to believe that nothing could ever break the bond we had forged. But then, unexpectedly, my wife rose from her seat, and the room fell silent. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were distant, her expression unreadable. With a trembling yet resolute voice, she began to speak, her words slicing through the festive air like a cold knife. "I have something to tell you," she said. The tone was calm, almost clinical, as if what she was about to confess were merely a mundane detail rather than a life-altering truth. I leaned forward, trying to catch every word, my heart pounding as I sensed that something was terribly wrong. Then the words came, each syllable a dagger. "I've been cheating for 2 years. I'm leaving you." In that instant, time itself seemed to fracture. The room, which had been filled with joyous chatter just moments before, was now drowned in an oppressive silence. I could see the shock in the eyes of our guests, the awkward glances exchanged among family members, and above all, the raw, unfiltered pain that surged within me. My mind raced, memories of whispered doubts, subtle changes in her behavior, and moments when her smile never quite reached her eyes flooded back with a brutal clarity. Everything I had taken for granted, every sacrifice made in the name of love, was now laid bare as a cruel deception. I sat there, frozen, unable to move or speak, as the words reverberated in my ears. My wife's confession wasn't a moment of weakness or a fleeting lapse. It was the culmination of 2 years of infidelity, a betrayal that had been hidden behind lies and half-truths. The realization that the woman I loved had chosen another over me sent a shockwave of disbelief and anguish coursing through my veins. I felt my heart shatter, each beat echoing the cruel irony of our shared past now tarnished by deception. As I struggled to comprehend the enormity of her revelation, I noticed my son, barely 8 years old, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, his wide eyes filled with confusion and hurt. In that moment, my heart ached not only for the betrayal I had endured but for the pain that was being inflicted on him, a child who had trusted both his parents implicitly, now forced to confront a truth he couldn't possibly understand. His innocent gaze, so full of vulnerability, anchored me amidst the storm of emotions, and I knew that, regardless of what happened next, I would do everything in my power to protect him and secure his future. In the chaotic aftermath, I retreated into a numb solitude. I excused myself from the table, my voice barely a whisper as I mumbled something about needing air. Once outside, the cool night air did little to soothe the searing pain inside. I walked aimlessly along the quiet streets, my mind a whirlpool of questions and regrets. How had our love, which I had believed to be a fortress, been so easily breached? Had I been blind to the signs, the secretive texts, the furtive glances? Every step I took felt heavy with the burden of betrayal, as if the pavement itself were weighted by the gravity of my loss. I found refuge in the solitude of my apartment later that night, a sparse, cold space that echoed the emptiness I now felt. I sat at my desk and opened an old journal, its pages yellowed with time and filled with memories of better days. With trembling hands, I began to write, pouring out the anguish and disbelief that threatened to consume me. I documented every detail of that dreadful evening, the mocking laughter, the shocked silence of our guests, the moment my wife had uttered those fateful words. Each sentence was a raw, unfiltered expression of my grief, a desperate attempt to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned cruel and unrecognizing. As I wrote, I couldn't help but wonder how I had come to this point. 4 years, I had labored to build a life based on trust, sacrifice, and mutual respect. I had dreamed of a future where our shared love would weather every storm, where our family would be a haven of hope and stability. But now, that future lay in ruins, smashed by a confession that felt as if it had been ripped from the very fabric of my existence. The weight of her betrayal was crushing, yet within the depths of my despair, a quiet resolve began to stir. I knew that if I was to survive this, if I was to honor the memory of the love we once shared and protect the innocence of our child, I had to find a way to reclaim my self-worth. That night, as I sat by the window and watched the city's lights flicker in the distance, I made a silent vow: I would not let this betrayal define me. I would rise from the ashes of our broken promises and rebuild my life on my own terms, a life where my value was measured not by the cruel words of my wife, but by my own strength, resilience, and unwavering determination. The journey ahead would be long and painful, fraught with moments of searing loss and quiet victories, but I was ready to face it head-on. In that small, lonely room, as I turned the pages of my journal, I began to sketch out the first tentative plans for a new future. I promised myself that I would seek answers, learn from this agony, and ultimately, transform this heartbreak into a catalyst for growth. I would protect our child, rebuild the shattered remnants of our life, and, in time, perhaps even understand the mysterious unraveling of the love we once cherished. It was a daunting challenge, a path lined with uncertainty and endless questions, but it was also a path toward reclaiming who I truly was. And so, with each tear-stained page and every whispered word of defiance, I began the slow, painful process of rebuilding my soul. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was determined to emerge from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. My journey from that shattering anniversary dinner to a future of self-reclamation had begun, a journey marked by loss, pain, and the unyielding hope that, one day, I would not only find redemption for myself but also forge a legacy of love and strength that would outshine the shadows of betrayal. In the aftermath of that humiliating day at the hotel, every hour seemed to stretch into an eternity of loneliness and bitter self-reflection. I spent the next several days trapped in a fog of isolation, my mind a whirlwind of anger, shame, and aching disbelief. I couldn't escape the image of my wife's indifferent smirk as her friends laughed behind her back, and the crushing reality that I had been left to fend for myself, forced to scramble for a room while my heart sank deeper with every mocking whisper. It was as if the world had conspired to strip away every shred of dignity I had clung to for so long. I retreated into my small apartment, a cold and sterile space that suddenly felt like a prison. Each morning, I woke with a hollow ache in my chest and a mind buzzing with questions I never had the courage to ask before. Was I not enough? Had I sacrificed everything for a future that now seemed like a cruel illusion? I spent hours staring blankly out of the window, watching as the city carried on indifferent to my inner turmoil, each passerby a reminder that life continued even as mine had fractured. In a desperate bid to make sense of the chaos, I began to pour my feelings into a battered journal. I scribbled down every painful detail, the shock of finding out no room had been booked for me, the cruel laughter of strangers and friends alike, and the overwhelming sense of abandonment that gnawed at me day and night. My handwriting was erratic, the ink smudged with tears I refused to shed in public, but on those pages, I found a fragment of truth. Every written word became both a cathartic release and a silent promise that I would not let this humiliation define me forever. As the days passed, my journal entries grew from anguished rants into thoughtful reflections. I began to see that the incident wasn't just a single act of neglect, it was the culmination of unspoken grievances, a slowly building resentment that had festered beneath the surface of our relationship. I recalled the countless times I had rearranged my life to accommodate her whims, always with the silent hope that my sacrifices would someday be recognized. Instead, I had been left standing alone at the check-in desk, my pride trampled by the very people I had once trusted. Amidst this internal storm, I found myself oscillating between sinking deeper into despair and the faint stirrings of resolve. Late at night, when the darkness was almost complete and the only sound was the persistent hum of my thoughts, I began to wonder if I could use this heartbreak as a catalyst for something new, a way to rebuild not only my shattered pride but also to redefine what it meant to live a life on my own terms. I knew that if I was going to rise above this moment, I had to start by reclaiming control over my own narrative. One cold evening, as I trudged along empty city streets after a long day of brooding and silent suffering, I met an old friend unexpectedly. We stopped at a nearly deserted diner, where over cups of bitter coffee, he listened as I recounted every painful detail of that day, the sting of rejection, the casual cruelty of her words, and the sense of being utterly invisible in a world that should have been mine to share. "You've got to find your own worth," he said quietly, his tone both gentle and firm. "Don't let anyone else decide what you're worth. You're more than this moment, more than a bad day. You're a force waiting to break free." His words, simple yet profound, ignited a flicker of determination within me. For the first time since that day, I felt a spark of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild my life piece by piece. Bolstered by that encounter, I resolved to take action. I began by making small, deliberate changes in my daily routine. I started waking up a little earlier, taking long walks in the quiet of the morning, and allowing the fresh air to clear the fog of despair from my mind. In those solitary walks, I found moments of clarity, brief, almost imperceptible instants when I could see beyond the pain and glimpse the possibility of a future defined by my own choices, not by the neglect of others. I also turned to books on personal growth and resilience, stories of individuals who had faced similar betrayals and had emerged stronger, more self-assured. Their journeys, though fraught with hardship, were filled with the kind of raw, unfiltered determination that I longed to embrace. I devoured every word, every lesson, and slowly began to see that my own story, as painful as it was, had the potential to become a testament to the strength of the human spirit. I realized that while the scars of that day might never fully disappear, they could serve as reminders of the battles I had fought and the resilience that had carried me through. At work, I began to throw myself into projects with a renewed intensity. Every meeting, every deadline, became an opportunity to prove that I was more than the sum of that humiliating day. I pushed myself to innovate, to contribute ideas that were bold and forward-thinking. My colleagues noticed the change, a quiet fire in my eyes, a determination in my voice that hadn't been there before. Slowly, the accolades began to trickle in, small affirmations that my efforts were paying off, that I was capable of transcending the pain. Every successful project was a silent defiance against the notion that I was unworthy, a small victory that fueled the growing ember of self-respect. Yet, even as my professional life started to reassert itself, the personal betrayal still lingered like a dark cloud. I often found myself in moments of deep introspection, grappling with questions of identity and worth. In therapy sessions, I began to open up about the relentless feeling of rejection, the countless times I had felt diminished, the weight of those dismissive words that had slowly eroded my self-esteem. My therapist, a calm and understanding soul named Dr. Lin, encouraged me to confront these feelings head-on. "Your pain," she said, "is valid, and it does not define your worth. You have every right to feel hurt, but you also have every right to reclaim your identity." Her words, compassionate yet firm, provided a roadmap for healing, a reminder that I could choose to rise above the hurt if I allowed myself to embrace the possibility of change. One pivotal night, as I sat alone in my apartment with the rain tapping against the window, I began to sketch out a plan for moving forward. I wrote down my goals, small, achievable steps that would gradually help me rebuild not just my sense of self, but the future I envisioned. I resolved to start a new project, something personal that would channel my raw emotions into creative energy. I dusted off my old guitar, something I hadn't played in years, and began to strum out melodies that reflected my inner turmoil. The music, rough and unpolished, became an outlet for the storm inside me, a way to transform the bitter taste of betrayal into something beautiful and cathartic. As the days turned into weeks, I found that the act of creation, whether through writing, music, or even small, mindful routines, was slowly helping me to heal. I began to see that while I could never undo the past, I could build a new future that honored my own worth. I started to connect with others who had faced similar losses, a support group for those who had been betrayed by loved ones. In those sessions, I listened to stories of resilience and recovery, and I realized that my own struggle was part of a larger tapestry of human endurance. The more I shared my story, the more I began to understand that my pain was not a sign of weakness, but a call to action, a challenge to rebuild my life in a way that no one could ever diminish. Slowly, the shadows of that devastating day began to recede, replaced by a quiet determination that grew with every passing moment. I set small, tangible goals, re-establishing a routine, reconnecting with old friends, and planning new experiences that were solely mine, a solo trip, perhaps, or even just a weekend retreat to reflect and recharge. Every step, every minor success, was a victory against the forces that had once sought to define my worth by someone else's cruelty. In those reflective moments, as I wandered through the familiar streets of my neighborhood and watched the world go by, I began to reclaim the core of who I was. I realized that the path to healing was not linear but a labyrinth of setbacks and breakthroughs, a journey that demanded both courage and patience. I embraced each day as an opportunity to prove to myself that I was not defined by the mockery of that fateful moment, but by my ability to rise, to create, and to love without reservation. And so, as I stand at the crossroads of despair and renewal, I carry within me a spark of defiance, a promise to never let anyone else's shallow judgments determine my destiny. I may still feel the echoes of that humiliation, but I am learning to transform them into stepping stones for a future built on resilience, creativity, and unwavering self-worth. Every page of my journal, every melody on my guitar, every conversation with a supportive friend reinforces the truth that I am more than the sum of my scars. I am a survivor, a fighter, and a man determined to rebuild his life from the wreckage of betrayal. As I stepped out into the early morning light on the day our vacation trip finally came to an end, I felt a profound shift deep within me, a quiet, unyielding resolve that whispered, "This is not the end, but the beginning of something entirely new." The sting of that humiliating day, my wife's careless neglect, her friend's cruel laughter, the cold, impersonal reservation that left me stranded, had once consumed every fiber of my being. But as I walked slowly through the deserted hotel lobby, each echo of my footsteps on the polished floor reminded me that I had the power to rebuild my identity from the ashes of that betrayal. In the months that followed, I found myself at a crossroads. I spent endless nights alone in my modest apartment, poring over old journals, rereading the raw, painful words I had scribbled in the immediate aftermath of that day. Initially, each page was filled with sorrow and anger, a diary of betrayal that seemed to define me. But gradually, as the bitter ink faded into something softer, those pages transformed into blueprints for a future that I was determined to claim. I began to see that the humiliation wasn't just a moment of weakness, it was a catalyst, a shock that forced me to re-examine my worth and envision a life where I was valued on my own terms. I decided that if my wife and her friends could mock me publicly, then I would reclaim my voice with actions that resonated louder than any sneer. I started with small, deliberate steps. Every morning, I rose before dawn, taking long, reflective walks through quiet city streets. In the crisp air of early morning, I allowed the solitude to clear my mind. I observed the rising sun with a sense of quiet awe and a promise that each new day offered a fresh start. I began to adopt a new mantra: I am more than this moment of humiliation, I am the architect of my own destiny. With each step, I felt a bit of the old shame lift, replaced by a resolute determination to redefine who I was. At work, I threw myself into projects that I had once shelved out of fear of failure. I led meetings with renewed vigor, pitched bold ideas, and pushed for innovations that would set my team apart from our complacent rivals. Every small success, each project completed on time, each client compliment, became a reaffirmation that my worth wasn't determined by the empty laughter of strangers or the callous decisions of those I once trusted. My colleagues began to notice a change, a quiet strength, a confidence that wasn't just professional but deeply personal. I found that the more I succeeded, the more I was able to silence the echoes of that fateful day. Meanwhile, my social circle, too, began to transform. I reached out to old friends who had always seen me for who I truly was, a loyal, kind-hearted, and determined man. We met at neighborhood cafes and spent long afternoons reminiscing about simpler times when our laughter was free of pretense. They reminded me that true friendship is built on unconditional support, not on superficial judgments. Their sincere encouragement helped me to see that the cruelty of that day was not a measure of my inherent value, but a reflection of their own shallow perceptions. I started sharing bits of my journey with them, quiet confessions of pain, small victories, and moments of introspection, and in those conversations, I found a strength that I had long thought lost. Even more transformative was the decision to pursue personal growth in unexpected ways. I enrolled in courses on emotional intelligence and personal development, determined to build resilience and self-awareness. In these classes, I met others who had been through their own dark nights of the soul, people who had emerged with scars that glowed like badges of honor. Their stories inspired me to write my own. I started a blog, a digital diary where I chronicled every step of my transformation, from the crushing humiliation of that anniversary dinner to the quiet, steady progress of reclaiming my self-worth. My words resonated with readers who, too, had felt overlooked or dismissed, and the outpouring of support from strangers was a potent reminder that my pain was not in vain. Every comment, every message of encouragement, reinforced the truth that I was capable of rebuilding my life, no matter how shattered it once seemed. I also turned to creative expression as a way to process my emotions. I dusted off an old guitar and began composing songs that spoke of loss, betrayal, and the eventual triumph of the human spirit. Music became my refuge, a way to translate the complex, often painful emotions into melodies that soared above the noise of my past. On quiet evenings, as I strummed softly under the glow of a solitary lamp, I allowed the music to carry away some of the heaviness. Those moments of creative catharsis taught me that beauty could emerge even from the darkest of places. But perhaps the most profound change occurred when I began to reflect on my identity, not just as a man who had been humiliated, but as someone who was determined to forge a new path. I realized that the events of that day, as searing as they were, had stripped away the pretenses of the past and revealed a raw, unfiltered version of myself. I remembered the countless sacrifices I had made to build a future with my wife, and I recognized that those sacrifices were still mine, proof of my resilience and capacity for love. I resolved that I would no longer allow anyone to belittle or define me. I started setting clear, non-negotiable boundaries in every aspect of my life, whether it was at work or in personal relationships. I took pride in my decisions and embraced the idea that every setback was an opportunity to rebuild stronger. One crisp morning, as I sat on the balcony of my modest apartment with a steaming cup of coffee, I looked out over the awakening city and felt a deep, unshakable conviction. I would reclaim my future, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a champion of my own worth. I began drafting a plan for my next steps, a roadmap for rebuilding not just my financial stability, but my entire life. I decided to invest in my education, taking courses that would help me advance my career and open new opportunities. I also started a small venture, something that combined my passion for technology and innovation, as a way to channel my drive into a productive force. Every small victory, every successful step, became a building block of a new legacy, one defined not by past humiliations, but by the promise of what I could achieve. My son, though far too young to fully understand the complexities of adult betrayal, remained a constant beacon of hope. His bright eyes, filled with innocent wonder, reminded me that even in the darkest times, there is a reason to keep moving forward. I vowed that his future would be one of opportunity and joy, free from the shadows of my own suffering. Every decision I made, from reconfiguring our savings plan to pursuing a new career path, was taken with him in mind. I wanted him to grow up knowing that his father was a man who, despite unimaginable pain, had the strength to rise above adversity and create a better world. As the days turned into weeks and then into months, the slow process of healing began to bear fruit. I found that the sting of that fateful announcement gradually receded, replaced by a quiet determination that each day was a step toward reclaiming my identity. I continued my therapy sessions, deepening my understanding of forgiveness, not as a concession to those who had hurt me, but as a liberating act of self-respect. I learned that forgiveness allowed me to let go of the bitterness that had once threatened to consume me, and in doing so, it opened the door to a future defined by possibility rather than pain. I also reconnected with my passions, traveling, writing, and even learning new languages. I began to plan small getaways with my son, trips that were filled with laughter, discovery, and the simple pleasures of life. Each adventure was a reaffirmation that life could still be beautiful, that the scars of betrayal did not have to dictate my happiness. I rediscovered the joy of experiencing new places and cultures, and with each journey, I felt a little more whole. At work, my newfound resolve transformed my approach to leadership. I spearheaded projects with innovative ideas that challenged the old ways, earning the respect of my peers and subordinates alike. My professional reputation began to flourish, not as a man defined by his past failures, but as someone who had the vision and tenacity to lead through adversity. Every successful project, every compliment from a colleague, was a silent victory, a testament to the power of resilience and the triumph of self-belief. As I continued to build this new chapter of my life, I made it a point to celebrate every small victory, every moment of progress, no matter how insignificant it might seem to the outside world. I started hosting intimate gatherings with friends, a mix of old allies and new acquaintances, where we would share our stories of overcoming setbacks and supporting one another through difficult times. Those evenings, filled with heartfelt conversations and shared laughter, served as a constant reminder that my journey was not one of isolation, but of community and connection. One day, as I was reflecting on the winding path that had led me from that devastating anniversary dinner to this moment of quiet triumph, I realized that my past, with all its pain and betrayal, had forged within me a strength I never knew I possessed. I recognized that every harsh word, every moment of scorn, had been a crucible that had tempered my spirit, making me not only more resilient but more compassionate. I began to see that my struggles had given me the wisdom to understand that true self-worth comes from within, built on the foundation of our actions, our persistence, and the love we nurture in our hearts. Now, as I stand at the threshold of a future brimming with promise, I am no longer defined by the humiliation of that day. I have transformed the deep wounds of betrayal into a source of empowerment, using each setback as a stepping stone toward a life that is wholly and unapologetically mine. My journey has taught me that while pain may scar the soul, it also carves out space for growth, resilience, and the rebirth of our true selves. I look forward with cautious optimism, knowing that the road ahead will still have its challenges, its moments of doubt, and its echoes of the past. But I also know that I carry within me a light that no one can extinguish, a light forged in the fires of adversity, nurtured by unwavering love for my son, and driven by a deep, unyielding belief in my own worth. Every sunrise now heralds a new beginning, a chance to rewrite my story, to embrace the possibilities that lie ahead, and to build a legacy that celebrates my journey from betrayal to redemption. I am ready to face the future with a heart that has learned to love, a mind that has learned to forgive, and a spirit that is unbreakable. And as I take each step forward, I carry with me the memory of every hardship as a reminder that I have overcome, that I have risen, and that my destiny is in my own hands. This is not the end of my story, it is merely the beginning of a new chapter, one where I stand tall, resolute, and unbound by the judgments of the past. I am the architect of my own destiny, and every decision I make is a brick in the foundation of a future that I am determined to create, a future filled with hope, success, and the unwavering belief that I am, without a doubt, worth every ounce of the dream I have dared to build.